Can you pinpoint, can you identify one positive impact in South Africa that was possible thanks to the CIF?
If you look at the CIFs, I mean, the CIF came in a phase where South Africa was in a position where it was on the cusp of moving into the renewable sector. What the CIFs had allowed us to do is, apart from forging greater collaboration amongst ministries that would not necessarily be sitting around the table together, it allowed us to do that. But what it also allowed us to do is do two things. On the one thing, it allowed us to push the boundary on what is possible in renewables, and there we looked at a concentrated solar power plant of 100 megawatt, which at that time was something really out of, well, not the norm. But also it allows us to look at how we use that in terms of catalyzing a renewable sector. What I just briefly explained to you, that linked to this concentrated solar power plant was a component that dealt with transmission infrastructure. And the whole idea was that, can we use the initiative in order to scale up? So what the concentrated solar power plant did was demonstrate the viability of that, but putting in place the transmission infrastructure allowed greater opportunity for smaller independent producers to be able to scale or feed energy into the grid. Putting in the transmission infrastructure allowed them to buy down the hurdle rates in their investments. So banks, who now were a little hesitant about providing funding because of the high capital cost of the infrastructure, were now in a much better position to do that. So in an initiative like the CSP, which was 100 megawatt, you created an enabling environment right around to actually scale up to 1,500 megawatt without you directly being the financier of that, but removal of a barrier or creating an enabling environment. That was one of the unique things that the CIF brought to the process.
What are your country's main obstacles for reaching its climate goals?
I think when one is looking at the issue about climate goals, what we usually talk about is what is the means of implementation. And in our context, the means of implementation combines a number of issues. I'll just stick to areas where I'm familiar with, and they're basically three. The one is finance, it's technology, and the capacity to do it. And in terms of the three, one would look at having the appropriate finance, both domestic finance, but also the finance from multilateral sources, and how one combines the finance in order to catalyze action or to leverage additional finance or action into the process. So that's one component. The other component is having the appropriate technology, either in the form of diffusion or in development or in the transfer of technology, for us to be able to make that transition to low carbon and climate resilient development pathways. The third component is the capacity to do that. The capacity to do that, but the capacity to sustain it, and then the process by which you develop the capacity. So ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a combination of all this in any different forms. The biggest challenge is not so much getting the finance of that, but how do you build sustainability of that? How do you sustain such initiatives? And how do you ensure that such initiatives contributes to leveraging more and leveraging action? But you need to also contextualize it. And for many developing countries, it's not just about climate action, it's about climate in the context of promoting development and promoting poverty eradication. Because if you can't demonstrate also that you are addressing the climate, you are creating economic opportunities, you're empowering people, you're dealing with social issues, you're not going to get the sustainability.